It's funny. Have you ever been on a team, or maybe even in a family, where a common problem just suddenly makes everyone pull together? It's this really powerful idea, right? That an external threat creates internal unity. But what if it's way more than that? What if this isn't just a little quirk of teamwork, but one of the most fundamental rules for how societies are built, from the ground up? We've all heard this saying a million times. And it feels true, doesn't it? But is it just a bit of human wisdom, or is it a deep evolutionary principle that you can see playing out across the entire animal kingdom? Today, we're going to find out if facing a common enemy really is the ultimate social glue. So, to get to the bottom of this, we're actually going to step away from the world of humans for a bit. We're going to look at how life itself responds to danger. We'll dive into two incredible case studies from the animal kingdom that show us how the pressure of being hunted can create everything from a temporary team-up to a super complex, highly structured society. Okay, I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really weird joke, but the answer gets right to the heart of our story today. Both of these groups have their lives shaped by a common enemy, and by looking at them, we can see this powerful pattern of social evolution in action. First up, let's head down to the forests of Brazil. Some researchers there wanted to understand this very specific way that birds deal with their predators. It's a strategy that's all about teamwork, but only when it absolutely has to be. It's a behavior called mobbing, and honestly, you can think of it like a defensive flash mob. When a predator, say an owl, shows up, all the smaller birds in the area will just team up out of nowhere. They start screaming, they dive at it, they basically just harass the predator until it gets so annoyed it just leaves. It's a temporary alliance created right there in a moment of shared danger. Now, to study this, scientists set up this really simple but super clever experiment. They took these realistic-looking models of two different owls and stuck them in the forest. Then they played the owl calls from a hidden speaker. One owl was a really high-risk predator, the kind that eats small birds all the time. The other was low-risk. It mostly ate insects. Then they just sat back and watched what happened. And this is where it gets really interesting. The birds totally changed their strategy depending on the threat level. When they were up against a super dangerous bird-eating owl, a much larger group of birds showed up. But they were also more cautious, keeping their distance. Against the low-risk owl, though, the group was smaller, but they went all out. Way more intense, way more aggressive. So they weren't just reacting blindly, they were actually calculating the risk. So the big takeaway from the birds is pretty simple. A predator shows up and acts like a magnet, pulling all these different birds together into a temporary team. Threat appears, the group forms. Threat leaves, the group just dissolves and goes back to business. It's simple, effective, on-the-spot cooperation. But that brings up a really fascinating question, right? What happens when the threat doesn't leave? What if the danger is just always there? Well, for our next case, let's dive into Lake Tanganyika in Africa to see how that changes things. Okay, so meet the cichlid fish. These little guys live in these really complex family groups. You've got a dominant breeding pair, kind of like the king and queen, and then a whole team of helpers who pitch in to defend the territory and take care of the babies. And believe me, they need all the help they can get because their neighborhood is absolutely full of predators. For them, the threat is permanent. So when scientists started comparing different groups of these fish, they found something pretty remarkable. In the parts of the lake with tons of predators, the number of small, young helper fish was down by about 25%. The constant pressure was literally weeding out the most vulnerable members of the society. But here's the other side of that coin. In those same super dangerous areas, the number of big, tough defensive helpers shot up by 40%. So the group wasn't just shrinking, it was fundamentally restructuring itself. It was becoming a better, more effective fighting unit. The society itself was adapting to the pressure. Okay, so let's pause for a second. We've got this temporary mob of birds on one hand, and this permanent, highly structured society of fish on the other. Now let's connect the dots, because when you put them together, they show us something really powerful about how societies evolve. This table really lays it all out perfectly. Look at the birds on the left. A temporary threat leads to a temporary alliance. The result? Simple cooperation. Now look over at the cichlids on the right. A constant, ever-present threat forges a permanent social structure, complete with a hierarchy and a clear division of labor. It's a whole different ballgame. So what is the big takeaway here? Why does any of this matter? I mean, who cares that a passing owl makes a bird mob, while a lake full of predators forges a fish society? It matters because it shows us that the whole enemy of my enemy idea is really just the tip of the iceberg. The real impact of external pressure goes so much deeper than just bringing everyone together for a little while. And here's the bottom line. Constant, unrelenting pressure is one of nature's most powerful engines for building social complexity. It doesn't just bring individuals together. It sorts them. It gives them roles. It builds the hierarchies and the structures that define what a true society even is. So a threat isn't just glue, it's an architect. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought to chew on. We've just seen how danger can be this incredibly powerful creative force in building societies from the ground up. But it really makes you wonder, if a persistent threat is what forges social complexity, what kind of societies become possible when that threat is finally gone? What does true safety allow?